Well, in case you missed it, the Romans took Kevin Hart and nailed him to a cross last week.
Oh.
He is dying for our sins and his homophobic jokes.
I cannot believe we're still talking about this.
I know. We like to keep the topics fresh. Like, trust us, we don't want to talk about this that much more, but he keeps adding to the conversation.
He has wasted so much collectively of our time with this bullshit.
A story that really shouldn't have been a story.
Nope, sure.
All you had to do was apologize. You would still be hosting the Oscars. No one would care.
Or quit and be quiet about it.
Yeah.
Also would have taken that.
But no, Kevin Hart is still on his apology tour where he hasn't truly apologized. And last week, he made an appearance on The Ellen Show where he announced that he was, quote unquote, evaluating if he should return to host the Oscars after all. After Ellen literally just sat there saying, Kevin, you're my friend. I think you should host the Oscars. I think you should host the Oscars.
I called the Academy and told them to take you back. I started a hashtag for you to come back to the Oscars.
First of all, couldn't you have texted the Academy? The Academy saw Ellen's 7th call and were like, if this heifer calls one more time, send an email.
It's mind-boggling. Okay, well, first of all, as somebody who is obsessed with the Oscars, let me just say, pardon me if I've said this before, I don't usually care who the host is.
Right.
It's like people who are obsessed with football, it's like who is performing the national anthem at the Super Bowl. It's like, I guess I'll see it, but I'm not going to, years later with my boys, be like, oh my God, remember when the Dixie Chicks killed it in 03? No, it's not going to happen. So the fact that we're still on this conversation is so stupid, but the thing that was horrible about it was when he's sitting across from Ellen, he keeps referencing these years of apologies he's given. And by the way, we all have the internet, Kevin, so we can see your like alleged apologies. And most of the time, everything he has said up till now about his homophobic tweets, which we recounted in another episode, amount to, I wouldn't say those things now because people are more sensitive. And let me tell you something, Kevin. I already know you have a problem with wimpiness because one of the jokes you made was about smashing a dollhouse on your gay kid's head. So I already knew you had a problem with sensitivity.
And not even the Ibsen book.
No, right.
For me...
Which would hurt more.
With that prestige.
That play is so big.
For me, the Kevin Hart stuff, I've just found so profoundly, uninteresting. I thought his tweets were boring, stupid homophobia. It should have just been an immediate, oh, this is not okay, we're done.
Yeah.
I thought the conversation around it is uninteresting. The most interesting thing that's happened was the Ellen conversation, because I think it brought up conversations about marginalized groups and who is or isn't allowed to forgive. That's kind of interesting. But it is very much I think about a lot of the things that I wrote for Jezebel, which was very racism 101. By the way, this is bad. I don't think people are having interesting conversations. To your point, I don't think anyone gives a shit who's hosting the Oscars. And it was just you're wasting our time with something that should have been such a quick oh, look what we found, great, we're done with him.
Yeah.
None of this needed to continue. And it's so uninteresting and it's taking away from other things that we could be having conversations about.
And also, by the way, we could be having a valuable conversation about different kinds of homophobia and black. And Don Lemon's response got into that a little bit, which was great. But for the most part, we got another quote unquote apology from Kevin alongside Ellen, where he said the words Kevin Hart 50 times and the word homophobia once.
It was very weird that he kept referring to himself in the third person.
Yeah.
Oh man, Kevin Hart's gonna I didn't even get to bask in the glow of Kevin Hart gets to host the Oscars. I'm like, do you know that you're Kevin Hart?
It was watching Ellen too just sit there and say nothing. And it was that moment of oh, it's just because you're all rich and famous. You're all operating. It's kind of it's not good, right? But you're wow, they have really abandoned all of these other things that might have been dividers between them because they're both super rich and famous. And it really was this shit about the haters on the internet. And that shit was oh, Ellen is just sort of caping for someone else who's at her kind of power level. And that's what she cares about. And it really was oh, you're different because of the situation that you're in now.
Right. That's mostly what I addressed in the piece that I wrote for The Hollywood Reporter.
Oh, do you still write? I've meant to discourage you from doing that. Go ahead.
Well, once I finish my novel on 16th century shoes in Russia, you will find out how great a writer I am.
Okay. Well, until fucking then.
Okay. the czars are waiting for it. Is that what they call them in Russia?
Czars, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, right. Anyway, I just wrote about the fact that the self-preservation of celebrities is wild.
Crazy.
Because you could tell Ellen was like, I'm a comedian, I'm wealthy. Kevin Hart's a comedian, he's wealthy. We are sort of vibing. I mentioned that it was completely different from when she did an actual interview with Caitlyn Jenner on her views on same-sex marriage, which were wonky because Ellen, as a lesbian who is married to Portia de Rossi, Caitlyn Jenner having fucked up views about same-sex marriage affected her.
Right.
You know? And so she was pissed off and she had something to say. Also, Caitlyn Jenner is a Republican. She's part of the Kardashian family. She voted for Trump. It's obvious that Ellen isn't fucking with her and like doesn't go to parties where she's at.
Yeah.
Whereas with the Kevin Hart thing, it wasn't even an interview. It was just sort of like, oh, here's my friend. It was sort of like...
And then her trying to convince him to take the job back.
Right. It was sort of like if I have a friend that Kara doesn't like, but I'm still friends with that person, I invite Kara to dinner, and then I invite that friend to dinner, and I'm just like, well, I like them. You should still be friends with them.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it gave me a little bit of a Me Too thing in that when the men around a lot of that, the men that have spoken out and said dumb things, it's because they're kind of afraid it could happen to them. Not kind of. They're afraid it could happen to him. And the Ellen thing was a little like she maybe could see a world where the trolls and the quote-unquote haters are coming after her, another rich comedian, that kind of thing. And it seemed like she was like, that's
well, to be
where
fair,
it was
they
coming from.
did. You remember
Right.
on the Ellen show when she was literally slammed for that entire dog adoption
Oh,
incident?
my God, yes.
And
Yeah.
then she did this
What a wild moment.
tearful
Yeah.
thing on TV that was obnoxious and wild. It was early days of Twitter. If it happened now, she would have gotten dragged
But
to
you
hell.
could see like she's kind of afraid that like what happened to Kevin Hart could happen to her, which was why she probably felt the need to jump into this and to control that narrative and to do whatever she did with it. And like it's a little, I mean, it's not a little, like it's sad and just also so deeply unnecessary.
Oh, yeah. Also, something to me that was so interesting and kind of un-Ellen about the whole situation was I feel like she's somebody who, like, for instance, Kevin Hart keeps talking about basically a conspiracy against him and his reputation. I feel like Ellen is one of these people who, like, is a master of dealing with of addressing people online and kind of calming people down and sort of being like, it's okay that we all have these negative feelings or whatever. We can work through them. She basically was taking his side and being like, these people who don't like you, you're right. What is wrong with them? That felt very unlike her to me.
To be fair, I feel like it's also couched in the fact that there are constantly always rumors that Ellen is kind of not as nice as she pretends to be on TV.
Which would make me love her.
And I feel like part of it is she's always dealing with the things, like when people who used to work for Ellen are always like, this was a bad experience for me. I feel like part of that was couched in her being like, I've had people saying that, like, I'm awful. I have the haters after me. I get what Kevin's going through. Yeah. Like Kara said, the only interesting thing that really happened was seeing pieces from queer Black people responding to the Ellen thing.
Right.
And especially Don Lemon, who at this point I think has been replaced by whatever body double is living in the White House pretending to be Melania, because the Don Lemon who is on CNN addressing this is not the Don Lemon.
Is not the Don Lemon that once said to a woman who had been raped, why didn't you like fight back and bite his penis, basically? Not the same man.
Brand new Don Lemon. I really liked how he got to the point of, listen, we all hate it when people are like, the Black community is more homophobic than the white community because white people are just as homophobic.
Well, there's like studies that they're
yes,
literally not.
Yeah, and they are the ones who pass anti-gay legislation in America. But there is the idea that we do not address homophobia in the Black community, especially when it comes to, Black male stars like a Kevin Hart. These things are things that, like, Black queer people are supposed to just sort of brush off. It's a thing where it's sort of like, oh, he said like a homophobic joke, and his response of people are too sensitive now is why he doesn't tell those jokes suggests that he in no way has thought about it where he's like, those jokes are harmful to people.
Right.
It's just sort of like, oh, it's just jokes. I'm making fun of gay people. Like, we all do that.
Well, the thing about the Don Lemon stuff and what you said about the articles that came out, that conversation, right, about homophobia within the Black community needs to happen with Black people. White people have no business being part of that conversation. And so Don Lemon speaking to this other person and those writers having that conversation, like, this is something that, like, we need to deal with the way, like, white people should talk about white people and homophobia. Everyone, like, and I think that that's sometimes where the conversation gets muddled. Mm-hmm. And so it was like, great, this is a time for like us to talk about this together and try to come to something. And like, there hasn't really been that opportunity where like those were the voices that were really, you know what I mean? That were being elevated and getting a chance to talk about this.
Well, and it's particularly hard to have those conversations because now that, you know, media is so much more mainstream and accessible via social media. You know, Black Twitter can't even have a conversation without white people jumping in or like a white media outlet reprinting what has been said or what's trending on it. It's the idea that, you know, you see a media takeout, the shade room, things like these which report on Black celebrity. You look at the comments section and they are dripping with homophobia, misogyny. It's like these are conversations that I don't think that people in Black media outlets are properly addressing. And it's a thing that we really do need to have that intra-community conversation without sort of talking with white people.
Yeah.
The thing that really upset me about Nick Cannon after...
What did he do?
Well, remember, because he was defending Kevin Hart at first.
All these dummies who've been defending him.
And the thing that he was doing, when we talked about before, when he was like, well, you know, I remember when Sarah Silverman or Amy
Chelsea
Schumer
Handler,
or Chelsea Handler made these things. I was like, we're not talking about these white people. We're talking about you.
Yeah.
You know, we're talking about why no one batted an eye that Rick Ross, you know, just said fag in a new song on a Meek Mill and Jay track. It's like, Jay-Z, you are married to Beyonce. We know you got approval before that song came out.
Right.
Why is that on that song?
Can I also, Kevin Hart, I don't know if you know this, but it's not hard to search tweets, you dummy.
Right.
When he was up there like, they combed through my thousands of tweets. They're coming after me. You moron, it's a word search. Like, did he really think people scrolled through? He sounded like he thought people scrolled through thousands of tweets. And I was like, we already know you shouldn't be up here talking, but I was like, you really shouldn't be up here talking if that's what you think is happening.
That's how we know celebrities don't know how to use the fucking internet.
Exactly.
Right.
That's what you're not involved in any of this.
I say, Alexa, Kevin Hart, fag. And she's like, here are 20 pages.
It's also the fact that maybe, just maybe, people knew about the homophobic tweets already.
Right, exactly.
And just decided to ignore them because you're famous and were like, let's just not fuck up his money. But then when you started to be announced as the Oscars host, a show which a lot of gay people give a fuck about, people are like, hey, didn't he tweet fag a bunch of times? Did a quick search and it came up.
Well, I resent the idea that Kevin Hart thinks he's so important that everyone was just like, the gays got together and said, let's get our plan together
After all,
to bring
there
him
are
down.
7 of them.
Right.
We were at brunch and we were like, who are we taking down this week? Kevin Hart.
None of this was hard. It didn't take a long time. It didn't take a lot of effort. No one was trying to bring you down. This is real easy.
And also, by the way, he seems obsessed with the idea that we get some sort of thrill over like taking gigs away from him. Honey, I do not lose sleep because you didn't book Carnegie Hall. I do not care. You will be famous anyway. You know, it's just, it literally was a simple question. We talked about this the other week. Just a comprehensive actual apology, a reckoning with the culture in which these words and slurs exist would have been enough. We would have been fine with you hosting the Oscars because, again, we don't care who hosts the Oscars.
If men knew how to apologize, we would have been done with this shit.
Yeah.
Weeks ago. I was like, I cannot believe, or just like a publicist. I'm like, who is your publicist?
Yeah.
like, oh, just a well-worded fucking statement, and we would have been done with this shit.
Remember when like Scarlett Johansson apologized for whatever role she had taken that was Asian or something, and then the transgender role that she almost took, and then whatever PR person she paid $2,500 to, they did a great job.
Right.
Write it all out.
Which reminds me that we did not bring out the fact that Emma Stone shouted, "I'm sorry," during Sandra Oh's monologue
was
about
very
when she played
funny.
Asian in Aloha.
Yes.
That was hilarious. I just lastly want to say that Don Lemon also said that Kevin Hart can help change homophobia in the black community, and I'm not expecting him to really be a beacon of change. It is Kevin Hart. I wouldn't ask him to help me order at a restaurant, but I will say that there's something to be said about media, television and film, when we see black queer stories told on like Empire or anything else. It's usually by or like Lena Waithe doing something.
Mm-hmm.
It's usually by a black queer artist, and it feels very hard sometimes being part of such a small community trying to tell these stories. And the way that Regina King, my goddess, at the Globes was like, include more women in your films and in your crews. And when we talk about fixing diversity and gender parity in Hollywood, it usually involves adding more people of color, adding more women to things. One thing you could easily do is just work with more queer people.
Right.
It would not hurt Kevin Hart's career to make a comedy where the lead opposite him is Alina Waithe, or even like Titus from like Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt.
Yeah.
If we see more straight men, particularly black straight men, reaching out and doing things like that, I think that could go a long way. And it's something that we actually never demand of people,
It's also better than an apology.
It is better than an apology. I don't want an apology. I want a check.
Yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful.
So you're gonna Ira will be in the next Kevin Hart film.
I will be in Get Hard too.
Wanda Sykes is going to play your manager at a store.